Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to another Cladding Matters. As usual, we discuss all topics to do with cladding, specifically focusing on the existing structures which are currently under jurisdiction to do with that, specifically RAQ, that is the Royal Artillery Quays. And to that end, we have today Steve Day, who is a resident of Royal Artillery Quays and also runs buildingsafetyscheme.org, a current proposal to try and change the way in which building safety is managed to avoid this in the future. And Sue McDougall, thank you very much for your time, a current RAQ resident. So you can see it's not just Steve who thinks this way. There's a whole host of people stuck in the same position. And of course, our Lord and Master, Hamish McClay of Searching Bay. And as is traditional on this channel, we throw Hamish mercilessly under the bus.
Very, very often with our meetings, I will make observations as we go through. Now, what we do have are two people who are living under the circumstances. What we want to make it very clear about is we have a big focus here in terms of what is going on at Royal Artillery Quays, because whilst there is a serious, in fact, you could call it a pandemic throughout the world, we know, in fact, at this particular moment in time, we have my niece attending from Australia, and she says that they have serious issues in Australia with cladding. We know they have serious issues with cladding in Germany because certain instructions have just been given out. We know they've got the problems in Wales. We know they've got the problems in Scotland. But somehow or other, these issues are made even worse in Royal Artillery Quays because we have, as our music presented at the start, we have the big bad builder, the master builder, who in actual fact built the place the way it was initially, with regulations and a little bit somewhat ignored, I rather think is probably a good way of putting it. The way they chose to build it, then they marked their own homework and said, wow, isn't this fine? But it wouldn't be so bad if we just had that to contend with. It seems to be a systemic thing. We have a council who have actually decided that, contrary to all the evidence, that these buildings have been signed off at Royal Artillery Quays, and hopefully we'll get a bit of our music from the end, which is exactly called that, signed off, but not safe, because bit by bit over the history of Royal Artillery Quays, we have evidence after evidence after evidence to suggest this is not safe in any way at all. However, we have a council. Admittedly, the builder has gone quiet on the whole matter, which in fact in itself is quite bad. They should be responding. But the fact that Royal Artillery Quays themselves are adamant that this particular place is perfectly safe. What I will do through the period, I mean, both Sue and Steve here have great words to say about their experiences. I will just actually, I don't need to make any observations other than just making comments that have been made by other people to suggest to the head of council, the leader of the council, Councillor, remind me how to pronounce it again.
Isn't it?
Anthony Okereke. He's the leader.
Anthony Okereke. If you are watching, sir, please do take note. Hamish, what would you like to say to the dear councillor?
Well, I would like him to listen to the evidence which I will read through to him, which we know he's already received, and perhaps he would be interested in putting down, maybe he could put it in writing so we could read it out next week, his observations as to what he thinks now, or he's going to stick to his original statement that there is no evidence that the original construction breached building regulations in force at the time.
Hang on, I think we've got a graphic of that. There we go. This is the statement as made, undersigned by Mr. Is it Councillor Okereke, stating there is no evidence that that original construction breached building regulations. But Steve, we are in possession of a number of bits and pieces here. Would you talk us through this? And if anybody wants a copy of this, we're more than happy to send it to them.
Yes, no, absolutely. So what you see here is basically a list of all the evidence that one of these residents had some experts. And it also tells you when the council leader was sent the evidence by email by the Residents Association. So there is no way for the council to claim that they didn't have the evidence. And of course, they are saying that external counsel lawyers made the decision on their behalf. So the question
I'm going to go full screen on that so people can see it a little bit more clearly. Would you talk it through from top to bottom very briefly?
Yeah. So the question is, what was sent to the lawyers? But the council had it. So the first piece of evidence is a London Fire Brigade enforcement notice, which basically says the firefighting shaft was not in working order. Fire door protection was missing. So that's the fire doors at the bottom. And the regulations at the time of construction did actually require those to be in place. The councillor said no evidence exists of building regulations at the time. And this was actually, just to be correct, it was actually Councillor Taggart Ryan representing another councillor, the position of the council, which Anthony Okereke, the leader, is in charge of. So it is under him too, but just to make that clarification. The next one, Greenwich Building Control. This is the council's own building control said the fire shaft should be fully compartmentalised, but then they were surprised it was signed off without any compartmentalisation. That's basically a requirement of the 2000 building regulations, which required a fire door at the bottom of each step, which is what the fire brigade picked up above. Again, this doesn't exist, this evidence, according to the council. Next, the cladding manufacturer, Saint-Gobain, came, did an investigation after residents presented a very compelling technical case, spent a large amount of money putting up scaffolding and checking the cladding. And they said it wasn't installed according with their specifications. And it breached on fixings. It had plastic in the fire breaks, and everyone knows plastic and fire don't go well together. It was a shocking admission of building regulation breaches, because the safety certificate they relied on couldn't be relied on because they didn't install it to the specifications that were used in the test. So again, that evidence doesn't exist. The next one, Urban Change, which is a fire report, it observed that the workmanship defects, said the BS8 414 testing, which is the fire testing of the external wall, can't be relied upon because the defects were in the workmanship. And Anthony says that doesn't exist, that evidence. Again, this was all sent to him, as you can see in that third column. Barrett Redrow, the builder itself, came and did an investigation, and they found no evidence of any mechanical fixings. So they were marking their own homework, and they found no evidence of any mechanical fixings. But Anthony said that doesn't exist, that evidence, even though it was sent him on the 21st of July 2024. Then another fire report from Gresham, this time looking at the internal walls of the building. And they said it doesn't meet the statutory requirements, the minimum, that's the legal requirements. And it also, if there was a fire, could result in significant loss and prosecution. Well, you're not going to have minor defects that don't break the law, the time of construction, causing possible prosecutions. So it gives an idea of the severity. That was sent to Anthony on the 21st of October 2024. But he says that evidence doesn't exist. Now we have a side court submission from the two owners done by their legal teams and their lawyers. And they said the external facade was not compliant with the building regulations at the time of construction, which really uses the same wording as Anthony, that says there's no evidence of building regulation breaches at the time. And you see, that's the problem. And then the last one is another report by Capital, which basically says the same thing. The EW Weber system, as installed, does not comply with building regulations in force at the time. So again, the evidence exists from multiple parties or multiple areas. You'd London Fire Brigade, signed court submissions, fire assessment reports, the builder itself condemning their own work. But the council says none of this evidence exists. And they blame the external counsel, which we think we've identified. We've raised a complaint with the external counsel, and we'll have more on that next week, because we just want a confirmation that they really did do the advice. But we think we're about 90% sure that we know. And the council's position is it's them that came up with the no evidence. Right. The council.
Right. I think anyone with at least 3 brain cells to rub together is now cognizant of the fact that we got plenty of evidence to demonstrate at the time of building it was not up to par. Sue, welcome to the show. Can you tell me, what is it like living with this knowledge, knowing that for the past 20 years you've been living in a structure which is frankly not fit for human habitation under these fire risks?
Well, I haven't been living there for the last 20 years. I bought my flat about 5 years ago, when I should have known. I should have been told that there was a cladding problem, but
Yeah, right.
unfortunately, Grendel and Rittner did not let me know about that, and my lawyers didn't find out about it either. So it's been 5 years. Yes, I mean, it's obviously, it makes you feel very unsafe. I mean, nobody wants to be living in a building that has this many defects. But the thing that's just puzzled me about this more than anything else is, what is the council doing? Why is the council behaving like this? And that has been, constantly on my mind. I mean, we've seen all the evidence that they've been sent that it's not safe. You really would have thought they'd have been working with us to try and get it put right. But they're not. They're denying it. And it just seems so very strange. Does Anthony Okereke ever really read his emails? Or does he just think, oh, it's another email from those troublemakers? And if so, why does he think we're troublemakers? And what is his motivation? You'd have thought after the report, the Grenfell report, when Kensington and Chelsea were so criticised, that every council would have been afraid to have found themselves in that position. But apparently not. Now, with Kensington and Chelsea, that was a Conservative council. And one always had the feeling that they thought that their residents, the residents of Grenfell, didn't really matter because they didn't vote for them anyway.
Huh.
Now, with a Labour council, do they think that, well, we own flats, so we don't count? I mean, it's just a very, very strange mindset. We can't understand it.
We are totally shocked.
Really?
I personally believe that they are frightened of pulling. They've already pulled back the plaster. What they haven't done is taken the lid off the can. And I think when they take the lid off the can, the worms will in fact be everywhere. And I think that's the issue. I'm just going to quickly spot back to Hamish. Hamish, it seems incredible to me when there's such an overwhelming burden of evidence. It's almost like pointing to the king with no clothes on, pointing out he's got no clothes, and him blithely walking on saying, no, I'm fully clothed.
Well, we refer back to something that Sue mentioned there. There was no comment relative to the state of the cladding, the concern about the cladding, when she actually purchased her property. And I've mentioned this before, and it's worth mentioning again. The type of work that we do is to investigate properties. We take on the information held by councils and pass it on to the buyer's solicitor, so they have adequate information there for people to make a decision as to what is, whether there's any risk involved in going forward. And so I carried this one out discreetly, so nobody actually knew. We were accessing the council records, and there is absolutely no indication in those council records that there was a challenge with the cladding. There was no instruction that there was a problem with the management. Now, the council could actually have put information in about all of these flats to indicate it. So when the likes of Sue, I mean, okay, it was later on for Sue, that should never have happened. In Steve's case, it was very, very different. However, over time, residents have been complaining, yet we still have this statement that is actually being made. I'd like to countermand that particular statement. There is serious evidence that suggests the original construction breached building regulations in force at the time the properties were built.
It's disastrous that the fact that the very mechanisms of which we rely on to make, which is arguably the most largest expense in one's normal lifetime, i.e. buying a house, a flat, or a domicile of any kind, and having the information to make the proper decision to do that, Hamish. And when you, the expert, are going behind the scenes to actually dig it out and find no evidence there, that shows a breakup of linkage, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it surprised me, but one of the saddest things is the fact that I've been relying for the number of years. I'm not exactly young in the business. But mind you, I've only been involved with it for 20 years. I was led to believe that I could rely on building regulations until we started this campaign work. I believed that we could rely on the building regulation guys. We could rely on their comments to say this building is perfectly okay. Now, in this particular, on the situation when these buildings were put together, when Barrett's at the time they built them, they're still the owners actually, although they've got a management company in there. They at the time cut the corners. They put in some kind of building control, somebody to investigate, and sadly found. Well, it was sad that they actually found there was nothing wrong with the construction. Yet that has been countermanded by the building control within the council themselves, because they made that comment that they did not meet the building regulations in force at the time of the build, and it shouldn't have been passed, and they were querying that. But unfortunately, the council leader yet again advises there is no evidence.
I would say that I'm going to make a personal plea. Councillor Okereke, I know that even if you're not watching this, there will be people who can report to you that are. And I'm making a plea to you. There is an overwhelming burden of evidence that you can no longer ignore. It's out there in the public domain. We've even written a damn song about it. And it should have been right up your nose by now. And I'm asking you to do the right thing. Make a statement stating that you don't have to say that you were wrong or that you were at fault. All you have to say is you now acknowledge that the information has now come to pass, which leads you to believe that it wasn't according to building regulations at the time. And therefore, that will then open the doorway that we can move on and get actual reparations done. Until you do this, you've created an impasse. The very method by which you've chosen to disregard the information provided actually has created a problem all of its own. So I'm asking you, please, sir, do the right thing. Steve, before we sign off and I pass back to Hamish for the final word, what would you say? And you, Sue, have you got anything that you would like to say if you are speaking to Councillor Okereke right now? And please keep it clean. What would you say to the gentleman to take into account the information that is so obvious right there now?
I'd say very gently, look, can't you see it? It's making you look bad. Just admit that the evidence exists. That's all we're asking. I don't understand. I would really say to him, I don't understand why you're taking this absolute position when it's clearly not true. So yes, absolutely, do the right thing and just let us hear you say the evidence exists, because it does.
Steve?
And we had a meeting with Barrett this week, and we are encouraged by some of the work, but some of the work we're still in negotiations with. So this undermining of our position is very important for the ongoing negotiations on the remaining defects. If there's no defects, we've got nothing to worry about, according to the council. So I appeal to you, Anthony, Councillor Okereke. This isn't me on with my Liberal Democrat House councillor hat on. This is a worried guy in his flat, worried about his safety, and also with the chair of the Residents Association hat, worried about the other 999 people here. And after the Grenfell fire, councils are meant to listen to expert evidence of residents as per the Grenfell inquiry recommendations. And you're not doing that. You've been found out. You need to correct the record in a way that saves face. I understand that. But every day that goes by, we're going to call you out until you do it. And it's going to become all very difficult. And also the law firm is going to get dragged into this. We think we know who they are. We've made a complaint, and it will escalate from there, because they have a duty under the solicitor regulation code to actually correct the record if you choose not to. So I'm asking the council to just do the right thing, and we can move on. And I think we all want to, don't we? This is very nasty, and it's so unnecessary. But I can't allow this position to remain in the public domain that we're wrong about all of these defects, because the defects exist and the expert evidence supports it. I can't let this go. This isn't about me being right. This is
And
about.
if I could just make one last plea to any other residents of RAQ who feel that Steve, Sue, all these deluded and are making things difficult or slowing things down, please take a look at the evidence, come to your own conclusions, and please try and temper your anger and turn it into action. I think that's the best way of working. Hamish, can I pass you the last word, please, sir?
Indeed. And I think very important, a comment made by Sue there, that as a consequence of Grenfell and the disaster, the comment was made at that particular time as well, that notice should have been taken of what the residents were saying. And so far, what we've found, this particular council is choosing to override it. But there is also evidence to suggest this particular council and its leader, somehow or other, are not particularly interested necessarily in the views of the residents. One of the councillors has recently resigned because of difference of opinion, because the residents felt one thing was appropriate, yet the council leader felt something else was more appropriate, which was nothing to do with the residents. They weren't even considered in this particular consideration as far as we're concerned. So do please, whoever you are, whichever council you are, because this isn't the only council where this situation has arisen, do look after your residents. That's one of the reasons why you're elected.
Thank you very much. It only remains for me to thank Steve Day and Sue McDougall. Thank you for taking time out to be here. Hamish McClay, as ever, thank you for helping facilitate this very valuable medium, this beacon, hopefully, of hope. And to out there, all of you, try and keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. And we're going to end today with a bit of music and hopefully a strong message to you all. Until next time, look after that mental health. Do. Bye-bye now.
Yeah. You said it was safe. Let's have a little look at that. Signed off but not safe. Behind the walls we saw the stage. You wrote the words, we felt the flames. Now you're hiding behind the game. Hey, signed off but not safe. Truth don't bend and truth don't break. We got proof, so save that face, 'cause lives were risked in that place. Yeah. They said it's tight, no regs were broke, but I got files and mother flipping smoke. Dot and dab like you building a joke. Render too thin, insulation's a hoax. Told the press, nah, we don't see a breach. While your own emails out here preach. Compartment missed, that's fire code 101. But now you're ducking like you on the run. Fixing's wrong, spacing off. Steel with plastic bag, you taking them off a fluff. 2004, regs were clear, but now it's all asking HBC not here. You signed it off, now duck the blame. But I ain't here just to play no game. It's lives, not lines on a builder's plan. So step up, council, be the mother flipping man. Not safe. Behind the walls we saw the stage. You wrote the words, we felt the flames. Now you're hiding behind the game. Signed off but not safe. Truth don't bend and truth don't break. We got proof, so save that face, 'cause lives were risked in that place. Talking standards while flouting the facts. Meanwhile, residents paying council tax. What's that? Buy a box with cladding that burns and letters that gaslight like it ain't our concern. Yeah. Pre said the system flopped. E bodged and corners chopped. So if there's no breach, then what's the repair? Why you out here patching there? You wrote the rule book, now you won't read it. Truth's in your inbox, you just won't heed it. So here's your reminder, scribbled in bars. You can't hide the truth behind PR. Signed off but not safe. We see the cracks behind the paint. You took a risk and passed the blame, but we won't play that council game. Whoa. Signed off but not safe. Your words won't cover what they can't face. The truth is loud, no need to shout. We've called you out.
Very worried about
I'm asking you to believe me that a £33 million mistake is evidence for the amateur to argue that you reject the so-called professional arguments, you listen to the tenants, you look with your own eyes.
A resident here for 20 years has to live with daily.
That's like a fire lighter when you're starting a barbecue. Except it's no sausages, it's people.